So I'm sure if you're like me and you spend hours trying to finish your painting and you do finish it, but then it still feels that something is missing. It looks like it's missing that final touch, or it just looks a little bit dull. So what should we do? So the first thing we got is the curve tool. So the curve tool is my best friend. So a lot of times something that I struggle with my paintings is that it ends up being a little bit too flat. And something that I always do is just play around with the curve tool at different stages, especially towards the end, to increase the contrast in my painting a little bit more and make my painting pop a little bit better. For example, here we just bring the shadows a little bit down so that they are darker, and then we can take our lights a little bit up so that the lights are also even brighter. You can do the same thing with the different channels, the red. So for example, if we want the red to come up more, take it up. If you want it to come in less, you can take it down. So for example, in this one, we have the background is blue, so we want it to be a little bit more blue. So we can see here the before and after, a little bit of more contrast. Next thing we can do is just add some rim light. Rim light is the easiest thing you can do to make your character pop and separate it from the background. So when I was observing all these great artists' work, I started noticing something similar in all of them. They all do it to add some emphasis on the character, and it's just super easy to do. So you can see the rim light in all of these paintings adds that extra color and adds that extra framing for your character so that it becomes the focus of your painting. So what I do is create a new layer, make it a clipping mask, and then choose a hard light mode. And then we can just choose a color. Let's just say, for example, we go towards the purples, and using the brush, we can just add that in certain areas. And don't put the rim light everywhere, just add it in certain spots so that the painting doesn't look like it's completely bordered up by a certain light. And if it's too much, you can reduce the opacity of your layer to the levels that you like. So the next thing you can do is add some textured highlights. I know we all hear this, that just focus on the round brush, the hard and the soft round brush, the basic brushes. You don't need custom brushes, and I do really believe that. But to take your painting to the next level, you can just look at the textured brushes for your highlights. You can just add those textured feeling and textured brush strokes into some of the highlights of your painting. So it's very similar to before. Create another new layer, flip it, and then turn it to hard light mode again. Now we should pick a textured brush. So I pick the textured brush here. We can choose a color. Let's be more towards the red and yellow, or the orange maybe. And then we can just add that there. If it's too much, you can come back and erase a bit of it. And you can see as I'm adding it in there, I also erase. And you can see some areas look really nice. And if you think again it's too much, couple things you can do. You can just change it to overlay or soft light, or you can leave it on hard light and reduce the opacity if you'd like. All right, next one is simple background. I always hated doing backgrounds. Backgrounds is something that I just feel can take lots of time, and it's not really the focus of what I like to draw. So I've always done characters and I spend hours on the character. But then when it comes to doing the background, I don't want to spend another 3-4 hours on doing it. So I found this trick and it really works. You just can do very simple backgrounds very quickly by following this trick. And what we do is we create simple shapes that we think the background should have. And then we blur it out using the Gaussian blur to give that effect. So for example, here, first we do just simple shapes that represent mountains. And then using a lighter and a darker color, we give that illusion or the shapes of where the light might be hitting different surfaces and the shadows caused by the light. As you can see, these light and shadow shapes are very rough and really don't have details in them. But the idea here is because we're going to blur it out, it doesn't need to be detailed. So as I add all of these in, I merge all the layers for the mountain shape, and then I go in and blur everything out, and you get that effect that you see here. Then we can do the same thing for the stars. So using the round brush, I just add some big and small shapes, just giving the illusion of stars, or giving the shapes of lots of stars condensed together, or also in areas that the stars are separated. And then I go in and use the Gaussian blur tool again to blur that. And then I go again on top because I might have some stars that don't need to be blurred, and add some extra shapes in there for those stars. Now the final tip is to add some final effects. You can add noise, dust, smoke, and anything else. So what I like to do is merge the character layer. So we have one layer just for the character with all the highlights that we added, and then we have a layer for the background. So the first thing we can do is add the noise effect. So you go filter, noise, add noise, and then we can add it around 9 or 10%. So if you go too much, this is what it looks like. Of course, we're not going that much, but you can go around the 9% or 10%, and you can see there's that effect here. So after we add the noise effect, we can add some other special effects. For example, let's just say there's some dust or there's some like flames flying around from in front of her, so we can just add that. So one way to do it is just using the normal layer mode, and using a hard round brush we can just add those around, and they can be different colors. Of course, these things, for example, let's say if it's just like from fire, would have bright colors in them as well, so you should have them very contrasty. So these can also be like treated as two different layers. One is in the front and one is in the back. So we can create another one and do the same thing. And the reason we do this now, because the ones in the back can be smaller, we can also just blur them out a little bit so that it gives the impression of depth that some of these are in the front and some are in the back. So there we go. You can apply all of these tips that we learned here and all of these tricks into any of your existing paintings. So you can go back to your existing painting and just spend maybe 10-15 minutes and take those paintings to the next level. I hope this was helpful, and see you in the next one.